Hey, welcome back.
Today is testimony day. Whenever I was thinking about my testimony when I was a lot younger, I was so anxious. I was like, how is anybody ever going to believe my testimony when I hadn't been through a lot? Well, fast forward a couple decades, not even that, fast forward a few years, and I definitely began to experience hardship. And it was in those places those dark places where God's light shined the brightest. So when it comes to testimony, I don't think I'll ever be able to create that overarching narrative that puts it in a nice bundle that presents God's goodness. But what I can do is tell how God has met me in the middle of my story time and time again. I remember when I had my second child. My daughter, who is now 8, she was only 2 years old, and we were pregnant again. And we had just kind of settled into a routine where she was comfortable sleeping in her own bed and, establishing some routines in her life. And now we're about to start all over. And we did. And it was sweet moments. We were learning to do life now with 2 kids instead of just one. And it took a few months, but eventually I started to realize I was running out of gas. What used to sustain me was no longer available anymore. The time that I would wake up early and spend time with the Lord was no longer available because we were now out of the routine we had so sweetly set with our older daughter. And now we were back at stage one, with this little boy who was learning to adapt to the world. And I remember the poor advice I was giving other mothers who probably were not asking. They were not asking for advice. I said, when my kids come into my world, they're going to have to adapt. They're coming into my world. I'm not going into theirs. It was the mentality I had when I first had kids. And then it didn't take but a day or two for me to realize that no, they've changed my world for forever. And so I know something today that I did not know then, that my relationship with God was not optional. It was vital. It was essential to me being the person that He created me to be, the person that would show up with joy, the person that would be kind and considerate of others. I could not do that separated from God. And that's how I started to feel. My kids were constantly needing me, and it seemed like my needs were going unmet. I couldn't prioritize myself the same way I used to because time looked different. Agendas, calendars, clocks, they meant nothing in my life at this moment because I was on their schedule. And I know some moms and some people have done parenting completely different, and tip my hat off to you, but this is my story. And one day I was frustrated because I really noticed that I wasn't myself anymore. I was irritable. I was getting frustrated easily. And I began to rant. And I was like, God, how am I supposed to represent you? How am I supposed to love others? How am I supposed to be patient with my kids if I can't even find time to be with you? And it was like a tap on the shoulder. I heard the Holy Spirit say, go deep. And I learned to find a routine that did not require me to set aside an hour of devoted time like I love and like I was used to doing in the past. This practice actually reminded me of when I was a kid. I grew up in California, and we would have these times when we would have earthquake drills. And at the door was this bag that had a school roster of class roster with everyone's names on it. And then it also had the first aid kit and that kind of stuff. And if there was a drill, we would line up at the door, and whoever was chosen to be the line leader that day would grab the bag, and we would head outside. We would walk far into the field, and then we would have everything we need to make sure that everyone was safe. And the Holy Spirit encouraged me to do something very similar, to pack a tote with my Bible. That's my manual to live a life worthy of the call. to pack a tote with my Bible, my manual for life, with a journal, highlighter, and pen, because I believe when I set a meeting place for God, that He would meet me there and speak to me there. And I was to keep this tote ready, at all times. And that's what I did. I packed my tote, and I was not very optimistic about it, but I was going to do what I felt led to do by God. And so I did. I packed my tote. And when I was playing with my kids or whenever I was in the kitchen, I had my tote ready. And before I know it, the Holy Spirit was teaching me to connect with God in an intentional way, regardless of what time looked like. So when my kids went down for a nap or when they were playing, my son loved the bouncer. He could stay in there for forever, seemed like. If my kids were occupied, I would take that time to spend with God. Instead of washing the dishes or doing the laundry or doing one of the other a million tasks that seemed like needed to get done because there was just not enough time in the world to do the things that I wanted to do, I used that time to spend with the Lord. And what I learned is that He will lead you into all truth. He led me into understanding that I did have time for God. And so if you've experienced this situation before too, that you felt like, man, my life is just too busy for God, I want to tell you that you have to unsubscribe to the lie. Letting the Holy Spirit lead you into all truth means you're willing to follow. Allowing yourself to unlearn some things so that you can bring in something fresh and something new. I learned to make the most of 15 minutes. I learned to worship in 5. I learned to praise in 30 seconds. And it has forever transformed my time that I set aside to spend with God undivided. So if being busy has been an excuse for you, I want to encourage you to pack your bag, go deep, drop everything and pray, and be ready for when the moment comes. Until next time.